A critical supplier that provides 80% of a factory's laser optics suddenly fails. The disruption notice confirms an 8 to 12-week delay. On the production floor, that halt translates to a direct penalty of €250,000 every single week. Procurement teams immediately try to mitigate the fallout, but their authorization to spend without executive sign-off is capped at exactly €7,500. Millions are actively bleeding from the bottom line, yet the immediate budget to stop the hemorrhage is tiny. Closing that gap requires a highly precise, accelerated triage protocol before the line completely starves. Standard human-led procurement cycles often spend weeks on committee reviews and supplier audits. With only 2 weeks of inventory remaining and a minimum 6-week qualification window, traditional timelines ensure the assembly line halts before the first manual approval is signed. Solving a disruption of this density requires bypassing human latency entirely, using a system known as the Minimal Viable Intelligence Stack. This stack is built on a 7-stage algorithmic decision loop: purpose, sense, interpret, decide, govern, orchestrate, and learn. The loop removes emotional panic from crisis management. It forces chaotic supply chain variables into strict categories, evaluates them mathematically, and outputs an automated response. Rather than displaying alerts on a traditional dashboard, this theoretical framework ingests raw signals and synthesizes them directly into an auto-governed execution plan. The process begins at the purpose node. The system anchors its logic around the specific business constraint, resolving the optic shortage without breaching the hard €7,500 budget limit. Moving to the sense phase, the artificial intelligence aggregates raw telemetry across the enterprise, sorting the data strictly into internal vulnerabilities and external threats. Looking at internal signals, the company has 0 active dual sourcing contracts, and laser optic stock burns out in exactly 2 weeks. Scanning external signals, market prices are surging, and qualifying an alternative supplier takes 6 to 8 weeks. The visual timeline reveals the exact collision point: 2 weeks of physical inventory against a 6-week minimum wait for replacement parts. Spotting a gap in a timeline is a baseline function. To trigger a response, the system must mathematically model this void to calculate the precise financial exposure. This happens in the interpret phase. The framework takes those raw dates and transforms them into probability-weighted financial outcomes. The system identifies time as the ultimate cost driver here, projecting 3 distinct scenarios based entirely on how fast a new supplier can be qualified. The best case has a 30% probability of 0 downtime. The base case, at 50%, creates a 1-week gap costing €250,000. The worst case, at 20%, triggers an 8-week halt, obliterating €2 million. Since the best case is statistically unlikely to occur, leadership cannot rely on hope. They must execute a tactical plan optimized to survive the base case and insulate the factory from the €2 million drop. In the decide phase, the AI weighs these probabilities and outputs a definitive single-path recommendation. The recommendation targets a hybrid strategy: immediately purchase transition materials on the open market, fast-track the German supplier for the short term, and begin qualifying the cheaper Asian supplier to secure long-term stability. The readout displays a 75% confidence score for this action. Crucially, the AI estimates the execution cost for these immediate steps at €6,500. Now the framework hits the govern gate, an automated compliance check auditing the proposed solution against financial rules. It compares the €6,500 estimate against the €7,500 limit. Clearing the threshold, it approves its own request. The govern gate strips executive review out of the crisis timeline. By leveraging an algorithm to verify compliance, the factory saves days of operational delay. A decision sitting on a server is useless without action. In the orchestrate phase, the system routes the necessary tasks directly to the responsible departments. This generates a 7-step execution plan. Procurement sources materials by week 2, quality management audits the German supplier by week 4, production schedules overtime for week 3. Strict KPIs anchor the plan: 0 production loss and mitigation under €100,000. Coordinating this degree of cross-functional response manually requires weeks of emails and syncs. The intelligence stack builds and assigns the work streams instantaneously. A mature intelligence stack evaluates the outcome of its own decisions. This takes place in the final node, learn. Post-execution, the system generates feedback points, advising the incorporation of larger budget buffers for worst-case scenarios in future models. The document distills everything into one vital insight. Relying on a single monopoly supplier carries unacceptable systemic risk. Moving forward, early dual sourcing is mathematically mandatory. The framework serves as a continuous Lamy engine, capturing the precise variables of today's crisis and hard-coding them into the company's future operational resilience. A catastrophic disruption threatened to bleed €250,000 a week from the factory floor. The threat of total shutdown was neutralized by rapid parallel sourcing and precisely managed operational gaps. A dormant list of backup vendors offers no protection if the administrative friction of activating them exceeds the remaining inventory. Resilience requires an integrated algorithmic architecture. By processing the telemetry instantly, the intelligence loop executes triage within strict financial limits, stopping the bleeding before the factory floor ever feels the impact.